So these are big moments for us as a church. Ash joined April 2012, just a few weeks before we opened this building. And the date of our first Sunday in this building was July 22nd, 2012, nearly 10 years ago. I wonder how many were here for that first Sunday? Okay, quite a few hands were here 10 years ago. It's amazing. It's a significant day in the life of our church as we look back and remember. There's a photo the guys have put up on the first Sunday here. I remember this Sunday very, very well. We had no acoustic panels like this black cloth and these panels around the edge here. And I can remember preaching on that first Sunday and hearing my voice come back at me for about 15 times from different walls around the room. And quickly we found a solution with the acoustic panels here in this building. But it was an amazing and an exciting Sunday 10 years ago. And a dream had become a reality. A vision had been realized. God had worked a miracle, an amazing and exciting day. And I know many people here were not part of the church back then. We're not part of that journey and part of that story. And I felt this morning that it would be right to retell some of the story. Not to celebrate us, but to celebrate the faithfulness of God and the goodness of God and the provision of God. Psalm 78, verse 1 to 4 says this: "My people, hear my teaching. Listen to the words of my mouth. I will open my mouth with a parable. I will utter hidden things, things from of old, things we've heard and known, things our ancestors have told us. We will not hide them from their descendants. We will tell the next generation the praiseworthy deeds of the Lord, his power, and the wonders he has done." It's absolutely appropriate to tell another generation the things that God has done. We see that biblically. I think it's absolutely appropriate that we do that as a local church. We tell the story of the wonders he has done amongst us, not for nostalgia's sake, but that we can remember who God is, how he's worked, how he's acted, his faithfulness, his provision over years. We will tell the story of the wonders that God has done. A few years ago, I found an awesome picture of this building. I believe this was taken in 1955. I don't know if we can see that on the screen. I think it was just when it was built. You'll notice there's nothing opposite it, and there's nothing also, there's just trees behind it where the houses are there. So this building was built at some point in the 50s. This is where it was then, what it looked like. Notice how quiet the road is. Look at that, just amazing. So 70 years this building has been here. And I can remember first looking at this building in 2009. And we'd carried a vision as a church, you see. We carried a vision to have our own centre. For years, we'd met in hired halls across Mid-Sussex. But we knew God was speaking to us about having our own home. For years, this had been prayed about. For years, members of this church had given into this vision, a place for our community to come, a place of permanence and our presence in Mid-Sussex, a place to house the activities of our church. At one point, I remember this, before we had this building, we were hiring multiple venues in Mid-Sussex to do what we needed to do. It was over 20 different venues a week. We were hiring, setting up, packing down to run all the groups and everything else that we were doing. And we carried this vision. We'd raised some money. There'd been many prayers. And I can remember, it must have been 2006, 2007, 2008, just looking at loads of different options for properties. Greenfield sites and brownfield sites and old warehouses and everything. And then we looked at this one in 2009. Initially, only some of this building was available, but the agents then said the whole plot was becoming available on the market. Could this be it? I remember one evening, I'm walking around this building just by myself before we'd done any deal on it, just praying, Lord, is this the building for us? You can remember like circling the perimeter as much as you could on the building, praying, Lord, is this right? Are we meant to buy this building? And I can remember getting home to Dominique and saying, I think this is the one. I think we should go for it. In fact, I remember saying, I'll be absolutely gutted if we don't get this building. I can remember praying around the place here. And so we started this huge faith adventure of trying to buy this building, convert it, a £3.5 million project, a faith adventure required courage and prayer and incredible generosity, amazing team of men and women who made it happen. We had a bit of money in the bank, but we needed more. I remember the day we had a pledge Sunday for this building. We produced a booklet to kind of raise vision, and at the back it said, we're asking you to make a pledge in gifts or interest-free loans. We just kind of like, are the church in with us in this? Are they part of this? Do they get the vision for it? So we had this big pledge Sunday, and I can remember waiting all afternoon, kind of twiddling my thumbs. Like, what's happened? What's happened? Then the message came through. £450,000 had been given or pledged to this building. Absolutely, just awesome. I can remember thinking, wow, 450,000. It was an extraordinary day. So the adventure began. Now, I know many of you won't know what this building was like. So we're going to show a video that tells a bit of that story. Just forward notice, okay. You'll see a very young-looking Pastor Jim Partridge. Pastoral ministry may not have been kind to me. I don't know. It looks like I was about 14 when we started this building project. I don't know, maybe I need to moisturize more or something. I don't know. But please be kind to me as we show this building montage video. Thank you.
It's Friday, 17th of September 2010, and it's a momentous day in the life of the King's Church Mid-Sussex. I'm standing here with the keys to our new building we completed today. It's been a long journey for us for many years, looking for our own place, and the last year lots of hard work has gone in, hours of work, but we're here, we have completed, I have the keys, and I'm going to show you our new building. So this is one side of the warehouse that I've shown you. Just the other side of this white wall is another warehouse, same size again. And this is the other side of the warehouse. It's amazing to now be in the building. We moved the offices in January. We're running prayer nights and youth work and community groups in our Debt Advice Centre from the building. The plans for phase 2 are now complete, and we hope to have builders on site within the next few months. In fact, you'll see here demolition has already begun. This will give us a 500-seater auditorium. We'll have cafe, we'll have toddler soft play area, we'll have meeting rooms. It's so exciting to be in here and to imagine what this building will become.
I'm giving my hopes and dreams to you, Jesus.
It's the 22nd of May 2012. 20 months ago I stood in this position on the day that we completed on the purchase of this building behind us. It's been an amazing journey since that point, but we're now just a number of weeks away from us meeting here on a regular basis.
Today is the day you have made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. Today is the day you have made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. And I won't worry about tomorrow. I'm trusting in what you say. Today is the day. Today is the day.
So we're standing in what will be the main auditorium of our new building. And in here will sit easily 500 people, maybe even more, to worship Jesus together and just see amazing things happen in this space. So I just cannot wait to see this place absolutely rammed full with people worshiping God.
Wow, I feel quite emotional watching that. It's a journey that we went on 10 years ago. When we opened the building, we did a number of launch events for kind of local businesses, dignitaries. Our MP came, opened the building, and the local newspaper did an article about it, and it said this was a headline: "Miracle made from converted warehouse," which is just about the most accurate description headline you could get, really, because it was an utter miracle, really, what happened in this place. I keep this article on my pinboard, just above my desk, as like a daily reminder of what God did, actually, in this place. This building stands as a testimony to the greatness of God, and it really, really does. And that's why it's so important to retell the story. So important. I want my kids to know this story. I want other generations to know this story. This building is not just for us, it's for all those that ask, so how come you ended up in a warehouse? How come you ended up in an industrial estate? We've got a story to tell, you see. In the Bible, we see time and time again the Israelite nation telling the stories of what God had done in their history, what God had done amongst them as a people. It was passed down from one generation to another generation over meals and during their Sabbath days and at their festivals. Even to this day, it still happens. They would retell their story. They would remind one another of the wonders that God had done. And we see an example of this in the life of Joshua. If you have your Bible or a device, please turn to Joshua chapter 3 in the Old Testament. Just going to read some verses from chapter 3 and chapter 4 from there. While you're turning there, let me just kind of give you the heads up of what's going on. Moses had handed on the leadership of the Israelite nation to Joshua. And Moses had led them out of Egypt. He'd led them out of slavery. He'd led them into the desert, and he'd gone up the mountain, and he'd met with God, and he'd received the law, and he'd built the tabernacle, and he'd done all these amazing things. But Moses himself was not going to lead the Israelites into the promised lands that God had got for them. Joshua was going to do that. This is where we join the story. The Israelites were about to cross over into the promised land. This is the land that God had promised their ancestors generations before that he would give them. But before them, there was a significant obstacle. There's a massive challenge in the way. It was the River Jordan. And they had to cross over this river to get into the promised land. And remember, there were hundreds of thousands of people. This was a big, big deal. How is this going to happen? Well, in Joshua 3, if you look at verse 5, we see that Joshua says to the Israelite people, "Consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do amazing things among you." Consecrate yourselves. Get yourselves ready. Prepare yourself before the Lord, because tomorrow God's going to do something amazing and you're all going to witness it. Now, Joshua knew what the plan was. God had told him what the plan was. He told him that the priests were to go first. They were to carry the Ark of the Covenant. They were to reach the edge of the River Jordan, and they were to just stand in the edge of the River Jordan, and then God would make a way through. So we read this, Joshua 3, verse 14. When the people broke camp to cross the Jordan, the priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant went ahead of them. Now, the Jordan is at flood stage all during harvest. Yet as soon as the priests who carried the Ark reached the Jordan and their feet touched the water's edge, the water from upstream stopped flowing. It piled up in a great heap, a great distance away. So the people crossed over opposite Jericho. The priests who carried the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord stopped in the middle of the Jordan, and they stood on dry ground while all Israel passed by until the whole nation had completed the crossing on dry ground. I mean, this is an extraordinary miracle taking place in the life of the Israelite nation. God literally just stopped the river from flowing. It heaped up a distance away. Hundreds of thousands of people walked across on dry land. God did an amazing thing. He made a way where there seemed to be no way. What a great God. And as we go into chapter 4, look at the first few verses with me, because we see the Lord speak to Joshua about what to do. It says, when the whole nation had finished crossing the Jordan, the Lord said to Joshua, "Choose 12 men from among the people, one from each tribe, and tell them to take up 12 stones from the middle of the Jordan, from right where the priests are standing, and carry them over with you, and put them down at the place where you stay tonight." So Joshua called together the 12 men he had appointed from the Israelites, one from each tribe, and said, "Go over before the ark of the Lord into the middle of the Jordan. Each of you take up a stone on your shoulder, according to the number of tribes of the Israelites, to serve as a sign among you. In the future, when your children ask, 'What do these stones mean?' tell them that the flow of the Jordan was cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. When it crossed the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off. These stones are to be a memorial to the people of Israel forever." These stones are to be a memorial forever. I love that. Take 12 stones from the middle of the river, put them together in a memorial so that people would never forget what God did in that place. People would never forget the miracle working God. In the future, when your children ask, "What do those stones mean?" tell them, "This is where God did this." What do these stones mean? This event in Israel's history needs to be remembered, needs to be retold from generation to generation, not just for one generation, but to be passed on. Tell them the story. I just love this image of years later, families walking along the kind of River Jordan as grandma and grandpa and grandkids are running around, and they stop for a picnic lunch. And they're there having a picnic by the edge of the River Jordan, and a little kid looks up to Granddad and said, "Granddad, why are these stones there? Why is there that pile of stones?" And Granddad says, "Well, there's the story. Let me tell you what God did in this place." We will tell the wonders of God from one generation to another generation. Granddad, what do these stones mean? Church, I would love this pile of stones to do the same. I'd love this pile of stones. I know it's a bit more than a pile of stones, but you hear my heart. I'd love for us to realize that this story isn't just for us, it's for future generations. When people say, "So how come you as a church meet in that blue warehouse? So how did that happen?" We can say, "Well, let me tell you a story. Let me tell you a story of what God did in this place." I'm going to tell you some of that story. One day, God put a vision in the hearts of some men and women in Mid-Sussex, a vision for their church, a vision for their community, a vision to have a centre that was open for their community, a vision to have a place of hospitality, a vision to have a place people could call home, a permanent home and presence in Mid-Sussex. And it was a crazy, impossible vision, but God had given them the vision nonetheless. So they prayed and they gave, and they prayed and they gave. And one day, when we were trying to work out whether it was possible or not to fulfill this vision, do you remember that day when God did something extraordinary in people's hearts? And they gave, and they gave, and they gave, and £450,000 was given on a Sunday morning. Do you remember that day? Wow. And then there was that day, do you remember that day when we had such a challenge before us? You see, it looked like we weren't going to get planning permission. Planning permission was not going to be granted. We had to do crazy kinds of things to get planning permission. We had to pay thousands of pounds to a consultancy firm to sit on roundabouts and count cars on Sundays. True story. To see if we would have a detrimental impact on the local road network system of Mid-Sussex. And when that report was finalised and submitted to West Sussex County Highways, I remember clear as day when the email hit my inbox from the officer responsible for that survey saying, "I'm not comfortable with this. I can't see any reason to support this planning application." And I can remember reading it thinking, well, that's it then. Because the planners won't say yes if highways say no. And I can remember talking to Bob, dear Bob, who was our project manager, saying, "Bob, I don't know what to do." I said, "All I know is that we need to pray." So you've got people praying. And I remember then, 24 hours later, receiving an email from the very same guy saying, "I've reviewed the case, and actually I will wholeheartedly support it." True story. True story. Nothing had changed other than the people of God called out and prayed. God help us. I remember that story pretty well. And yet there was still opposition. People didn't want a church on an industrial estate. I can remember going to the planning meeting and having someone actually speak against us, actually speak out and say, we don't want this church here. And I can remember sitting there thinking, wow, this is tricky. They came to the planning meeting, they spoke against us. But then I remember how the very same person who spoke against us at the planning meeting then became a friend of us when we opened. Started bringing local businesses to use this building, invited us to share with local business leaders the vision for the King's Church Mid-Sussex, who at that very meeting with business leaders said this building is the best thing that's happened for business locally, and asked us publicly for forgiveness that he'd ever spoken against it in the planning process. I remember that part of the story of what God did. Complete turnaround. Then there's the day when God provided supernaturally again. When the quotes came in for the project, they were much higher than expected, and there was no more money, there was no more budget. So we began to wonder, what should we do? How are we going to fulfill this vision for the building? What bit of the building aren't we going to develop? Are we going to have carpets ever? Those are the kind of conversations. I can remember the conversations. It's like, do we plaster walls or not plaster walls? Just have breeze block walls. Do we carpet it or should we just have a concrete floor? Because we didn't have the money. Because the quotes came in higher. And I can remember saying, come on, we need to pray. I don't know what the answer is, but God, we need you. And so we prayed for a weekend. And we cried out to God, God, help us. Give us wisdom. I don't know what to do here. And 72 hours later, out of the blue, an email hit my inbox with a businessman who I knew offering us £300,000 on an interest-free loan, which meant we could complete everything that we'd hoped to complete in the building. What a changed prayer. God had heard his people pray. By the way, feel free to round of applause or whatever in these moments. It's amazing. Then there was this other day when it was like, oh man, the weather's so bad, and we were trying to get this roof on the building, and we hired a crane. Anyone in construction knows that the huge cranes, they cost a fortune to hire in. We'd hired it for a day, but in the week leading up to it, we had snow and high winds, and we were like, we're going to be getting a roof on, and we've booked this crane, and we can't really afford to book it twice. And so we prayed, God, please, will you help us here? And on the day that the crane arrived, the wind stopped, and it was a perfect, still day, and the roof went on in one day. These are amazing moments. You see, we have a story to tell, church. In the future, when our children ask, so how can we meet in this blue building? We say, there's a good story there. A story of God acting in amazing ways. A story of God giving his church a vision and then being able to fulfill that vision through prayer, miraculous provision. We dreamed about having a venue that our local community could use. That vision's become a reality. A couple of weeks ago, there's a science fair in this room. Last Saturday, 500 or 600 of our community at our King's Kids Summer Saturday. Thursday night, a school had their prom in this room. Friday, like I mentioned, an exhibition, 200 delegates from the Chamber of Commerce. From church conferences to camera clubs, from business meetings to baton twirlers and ballet classes and the brownies. From children's singing groups to chess clubs. From parent and toddler groups to Pilates, Zumba, and just about every other fitness group you can imagine exists. From life groups to local apprenticeship training for plumbers and electricians, awards evenings, school, Christmas carol concerts, interchurch prayer meetings, sewing clubs, science fairs, they've all been here, and many more beside. What a privilege it's been to welcome our community. 10 years ago, we had no idea how to do this. Did we, Ash? It was a big building, and we're like, right, let's open it to the community. Let's see if this works. Now, 8:30 to 10 p.m. every day, this place is full with our community. I'm not saying that to congratulate ourselves. I'm saying God gave us a vision, and he has been faithful to help us fulfill a vision. He is a great God, and this story needs to be told time and time again. He has made a way. A vision for a coffee shop, sense where people can find home. If I could tell you the stories that I hear of the conversations, it's just astonishing. People are finding home here at home. They are just the most remarkable things, really is. And here's a stat for you. Since we opened home, we've served nearly 90,000 hot drinks. Paul Wright keeps glorious spreadsheets. Gives us all of that information. What do these stones mean? What does this building speak of? What story does it tell? It tells a story of a God who gives his people dreams and visions. It tells a story of a God who provides in miraculous ways. It tells a story of a God who listens to his people when they pray. It tells a story of a God who does the impossible things. He turns impossible situations into testimonies of his power and his willingness to act. It tells a story of a God who provides the right people at the right time to see his purposes prevail. It tells a story of a God whose kingdom breaks in to change hearts and change opinion. It tells a story of a God who's faithful to his church. And so we retell the story to remind ourselves of who he is and what he's done. But not just that, we retell that story to remember we will not sit passive, because if this is what he's done before, what might he do again? What has he got? What's the next adventure that's going to get us praying like we've never prayed and giving like we've never given before? We tell these stories to remind us there are greater adventures and exploits ahead of us. So now we're here, we're not just going to settle, but we're going to keep saying, God, what's next? What have you got for us as a church? What's the future look like? And is it possible that you're going to do impossible things again? Yes, because he's done it before. He will do it again. Right at the end of Joshua chapter 4, we read this. So Joshua, this is verse 20. So Joshua set up at Gilgal the 12 stones they had taken out of the Jordan. And he said to the Israelites, in the future, when your descendants ask their parents, what do these stones mean? Tell them. Israel crossed the Jordan on dry ground. For the Lord your God dried up the Jordan before you until he had crossed over. The Lord your God did to the Jordan what he'd done to the Red Sea when he dried it up before us until we'd crossed it over. And he did this, listen to this line, he did this so that all the peoples of the earth might know that the hand of the Lord is powerful, and so that you might always fear the Lord your God. The Lord did all of these things so that people would know the hand of the Lord is powerful. He did this building so that people in Mid-Sussex would know the hand of God is powerful. He's alive. He does miracles today. And so that we might always fear the Lord your God. What does that mean? It means that we have a healthy awe, adoration, heart of worship, fear of our great gods. I don't know about you, but as I've been reminded of our story this week, I'm just like, Lord, you are so worthy of our worship. You're so worthy of our praise. What a great God. What a great God you are. How on earth did that happen? It's funny, I look at those videos now and I'm like, man, this place was a wreck. It must have been a God-given vision for us to go for it. And it was. And he did it. He provided. And so, hey, let's retell our story for the next generation and the next generation of what God has done. For some of you, I know you've heard that story for the first time today. And I hope it has encouraged you as to what God has done in our past and encourage you for what he's going to do in our future. But I want to just respond to God now by worshiping him. Worship team, why don't you come on up? Let's worship the Lord, shall we? Why don't we stand to our feet? Lord Jesus, I just want to say thank you that you are good, and you are worthy of it all. Worthy of all our praise, worthy of all our adoration. I look over my shoulder, Lord, at the history, Lord God, that I've been part of in this church. And I just say, wow, look what God has done. The wonders he has done that we can pass on to the next generation so that all people will know that the hand of our God is powerful. And so we come, Lord, to worship you this morning in Jesus' name. Amen.